Well, it's thrilling, and I mean, the last thing you want to be doing in a film program is to be teaching things that are kind of behind the tide. So when we finally got that type of technology, those LED wall panels, it's a relief, and there's excitement too. And say, hey, from what I understand, we're one of the only schools with an LED wall, and having the Rowe technology and their support is wonderful, is delightful, and it's like, okay, we're on the ground level, let's get going, let's start creating.
This is just our last day here at Salt Lake Community College for the semester. Jake's going over the final project that we work on.
I would have killed to be able to have somebody teach me how to do all this stuff. But there hasn't been anyone really to teach all of these pieces in one go. So I'm having a good time teaching over at the college, and I'm trying to teach in a way that I would have liked to be taught. Because there are a lot of different pieces to this.
I am a professor in film. I teach documentary. So I've been teaching here at Salt Lake Community College for 17 years, and it's been a pretty interesting journey. Behind me, my students in documentary, this is the Documentary 2 class. One of the students is directing a project that she wants to use a virtual production studio to have background images that the participant can see what the audience would see behind them. So they're looking at fruit fly brains.
Hello, everyone. I'm Sam Prigg, president of White Rabbit Productions, and you're listening to the White Rabbit Productions podcast. I've spent over 50 years working in the documentary, news magazine, shooting literally thousands of interviews for clients like 60 Minutes, Dateline, Forensic Files, Discovery Channel, BBC, PBS, and many others. Boy, that's a big, long list. Most of these productions are on location. They take place in the homes and offices of where the subjects live and work. And it's at these locations that we set up our lighting and conduct our interviews and shoot our B-roll cover footage. It's the way it's been done for years. We didn't invent it, but it's easy and efficient way to produce stories with a relatively small crew. But in the new world of film and video production, there have been some innovations in what we call virtual production technology. It involves a simulated natural or artificial looking background that can be incorporated into a production to enhance storytelling and to help demonstrate processes or procedures. And today, we're speaking with Aria Frazier, a student filmmaker in Salt Lake City, who is taking documentary filmmaking in a new direction using virtual production technology. Aria is a student at Salt Lake Community College, and she recently used a virtual production wall, something normally reserved for big budget films, to bring her documentary to life. Aria, you're still a student, but tell us a bit about yourself and why you chose the filmmaking profession.
So I've actually been editing videos, just personal projects, for the past 10-ish years. When I got to being on a movie set, it kind of was like, this is such a great field for me, getting to just hone in on a project and then have a break after and then hone in on another project. I also love to learn a lot. So with my documentary, Fruit Flies Decoding Rare Diseases, I learned so much about fruit flies.
It's been interesting. It was almost like we were learning from each other. I know that because it's such a new technology, I took a class with a lot of the teachers, and so it was really encouraging for me to sit next to them and learn, oh, even they're confused by it, and then the teacher, having to throw a lot of, he had a lot of plans for what class was supposed to be those certain days, and he would throw it out the window and be like, okay, we're gonna do it this way today.
So I too have definitely been a student in this. We've only offered this as a course for 2 semesters now. The first semester, it was myself and the 2 other full-time faculty in film here as students as well. So we were learning with everyone and trying to figure out what's going on. The best part about that is that I would immediately take what I learned and just practice it the next time in class. And hey, I just learned about shooting a a plate on location. Let's do that same thing.
And it was fun learning from each other. You know, like I know for a fact that like in the future, it's going to be very helpful to have, you know, that first class where he's still learning, because, you know, then I know future classes are going to learn from our mistakes, and then it's going to continue to get better.
So you're one of the few people, as a student or otherwise, that's been able to use a virtual wall in a production. How do you see this maybe evolving in the next 5 or 10 years for independent filmmakers or documentarians? Or does this risk becoming accessible only to larger studios?
I would say, yeah, because the virtual production wall that we have at Slick was about $1 million. And so it takes a bit of funding to be able to get your hands on a virtual production wall like that.
Some of my earlier heroes, the people that I learned documentary filmmaking about, were sometimes just a 1 or 2 person crew. Albert Maisel or Frederick Wiseman, or a couple of people, you know, from 50, 60 years ago. So sometimes we see in the production world where people say they can do a documentary with only 6 or 7 people, which is a substantial sized crew. No, I've not used a virtual wall, but in looking at some of the behind the scenes, it looks like it's fairly labor intensive. It takes a lot of setting up. Can you talk about some of the challenges that you had to face in setting up the wall and setting up that part of the production?
Yeah, the biggest hurdle was making sure that they could see what the camera was seeing, because if I'm pointing to something over here, the camera sees a completely different angle. And so I thought of using what's called an Interrotron setup, where it's basically like a teleprompter, except what I did was we displayed the monitor in the teleprompter, so then they could see themselves as the camera was seeing them while looking directly into the lens of the camera. So it was nice to be able to have them explain, this is the part of the brain that I'm talking about, and this is the part of the brain that I'm working with. Yeah, it definitely took a bit of planning, but I think it was so worth it, and it was so fun, especially being able to show the scientists stuff, because they've only ever seen a brain through a microscope. They've never seen a brain up on this huge television, basically. And so it was really cool to see their reactions.
And sometimes I feel bad. Sometimes I'm like, I'm sorry, thank you for your service. And then I pull their words out.
We have a lot of talented people out here that I think are able to take advantage of what virtual production offers. And so I think it's important not to miss that opportunity. We might get to a point where virtual production is so standardized that every city and every state has a virtual production option. But while we're still in those early days, if virtual production is going to succeed, we have to do it well. We can't, it's not just good enough to check the boxes of, oh, I've got a generic LED wall, we have a generic camera tracking. We have to have, at the end of the day, we have to have customers that walk out that are happy and that want to do it again.
We have found that with these panels, they are really, really top of the line, to the point where he was trying to show some certain effects that you might see on some of the lower end panels that might be rented out for like a day shoot that you just can't get on these panels because they are that top of the line production, you know, go shoot a Marvel film on them kind of thing.
I had actually planned an entire class over at Salt Lake Community College. It was supposed to be a 3-hour-long class on how to get rid of flickers and scan lines on the LED wall. Turns out I couldn't make the row wall flicker. I couldn't do it. It wasn't until we really pushed things to ridiculous levels and situations that most people would not deliberately shoot this way. And then finally we were able to get it to kind of flicker. But that's huge. That means that in real world scenarios, where we have camera operators and DPs coming in here, they don't want to have to think about those things. They don't want that to be part of their new workflow, is figuring out how to get the world to stop flickering.
And then focus on me, like running. We have 4 minutes. So I need to be like super quick, super quick.
So you're talking about fruit flies and brains and whatnot. What was the bottom line? What do you hope the audience knows, understands, takes away from the study of the brains of fruit flies? How does it benefit mankind?
I really want people to take away that there is value in the little things, and that this research is so important for the lives of people living with rare diseases. And because there's so many rare diseases that affect relatively few people each, there's not a whole lot of study going into solutions for these patients. And so I feel like it's important to let people know how good of a tool using fruit flies for this research is, because it's also cost effective, it's relatively fast, and it's just important for people.
If you had a chance to use the wall again on another production, what would you do differently next time, either technically or narratively?
Technically, I would want to make sure that I have settings a bit more balanced. The lights in front of the screen were a more indoor color temperature, and the screen itself is a more outdoor color temperature. So while the people in front of the screen looked right, it took a bit of color correction on the background because that looked a bit blue.
I think with any production, even today, anytime I go on a production, I'm always learning something, and it's important to incorporate, what you've learned into the, your next production.
It was really fun watching it back and, being able to take in what we did and be really proud of it, but also think about, oh, there's a lot of things that we still have yet to learn.
The biggest challenge that we have in our community college setting is we are a 2-year program. We could stretch out all of our teaching elements to be much more detailed, but we lose students. We lose them to graduation, and we lose them to employment, which is fine, right? We're happy to train our students to be able to work.
What the role do you think Utah has in playing, in that evolution of growing that infrastructure and the talent pool? You're now one of the few people, student or otherwise, that again has used this technology.
I have yet to familiarize with most of Utah's film scene, but I know that the Utah filmmakers, like that whole community of people, really cares about making film continue to happen. And documentary and virtual production are all a part of that.
Utah's local industry has always been a little bit interesting. We have a proximity to Los Angeles that is convenient, and we are a non-union state, and so that can mean a number of different things, but normally it means less expensive than shooting in LA or some of the surrounding areas there. And so we fill a very particular niche where clients have high expectations of high quality. Especially if they're coming from Los Angeles, they are going to have a very high expectation of output, but they need that at a lower cost. So the filmmakers out here, the crew and the cast, everybody out here has to push a little bit harder, and they're usually getting paid a little bit less than what they probably could make if they were in a different market. But I think there's a lot of love for filmmaking because of that. You have to want it a little bit more if you're going to be in the film and TV industry out here. And virtual production is an important piece of that industry because it aligns with some of those ideals of being able to maybe pull off a better looking piece of content for a little bit less money.
How do you see this maybe evolving in the next 5 or 10 years?
I think that it's going to just get bigger and bigger because it's such a useful tool. Because you can use it, as I used it, for more abstract backgrounds that don't need to look real in the place. But you can also use it for places that do need to look real.
Immediately, I could see the benefit of shooting an environment and bringing our participant here rather than taking our participant to this environment, sometimes far away. We can have a golden hour for 10 hours if we want, right? We can just keep reusing that same key or peak scene and rewind it if we need to keep shooting. So we can stretch out our production in a controlled environment with bathrooms closed and air conditioning and a nice staged area where we can control our environment and really have people be comfortable, and it's much more cost efficient.
LED panels come in a lot of different grades. There's also a lot of different techniques that people are kind of pioneering right now with virtual production, and it's a little bit of the Wild West, and that can be exciting, but it also means that things are not standardized. We've been able to start that process of normalizing everything by getting these same panels into schools across the state. Right now we have a pretty large wall at Salt Lake Community College. We're working on getting a wall up at Utah Tech. And the idea is that students will be able to learn on these panels, learn the nuances of shooting on these panels, and have those skills be directly transferable when they come someplace like what we have here at Redmond Movies.
We have a really great relationship with Redmond. They had an LED wall before we did, and it's been nice to work with the people there at Redmond to not only have their expertise and their training coming right to our students by having people help us even teach here, but to be able to work with them to keep up with like the industry standards. It moves so quickly.
Locally, we haven't had cinema grade LED panels to typically work with. Most of the panels that we've been using are for the broadcast or the live event industries, and those have very different requirements. They're still very good panels, they're just not specifically good for this type of a job. So that's part of what we're trying to do by normalizing the Rode Black Pearl 2 version 2 panels. Those are the panels that they've been using on all of the biggest projects out in LA. It's not the only panel. If you start going East Coast, then you might see more planar. Those are some other very excellent panels. But we kind of have to choose. Are we going to normalize and be closer to what they're doing in the East Coast, or are we going to normalize and do what's closer to us, which is LA? So for us, this makes a little more sense. And by unifying all of that, that allows this industry to really grow up and get out of being the Wild West. We have standards, we have rules, we'll have, and of course the rules are meant to be broken, but at least we'll have a baseline, we'll have a starting point so that people who are not familiar with virtual production can walk in and feel comfortable.
It's always been on our radar ever since we saw the old video with Matt Workman, the DP, where they had the guy in front of the motorcycle in that first video, and then Mandalorian came out, which everybody refers to it in terms of virtual production. And I got really excited about it. This space that we're in here has been, ever since they built this new part of the building, this has been kind of an empty space, but it was always called the Virtual Cave, ironically, before virtual production had ever even come out. But it was just the name of it.
Any other advice for budding filmmakers, whether they use the wall or not?
I would say whatever vision that you've got, do what you can to make it happen. Because again, you're going to learn a lot. It's going to be a lot of fun. You'll have something that hopefully you can be proud of. And if you're not proud of it, then you can take those lessons onto your next project, and then you can be proud of that one.
Very good, very good. It is an interesting profession. Any other last words of wisdom for other budding filmmakers?
believe in yourself. You can do more than you think you can.
Very good. Well, thank you for being part of our podcast. It's important to hear from students and us old people who have done this a time or two. But I think everyone needs to get some inspiration from the productions that they've worked on, and incorporating some of these new technologies that are available for storytellers like you and me. That's it for today's podcast. Thank you for watching.